Welcome, everyone, to a WCC preview. I'm Andy Katz, pleased to be joined by Jacobsen and Roxy Bernstein. Both know this conference very well. I want to start with, I'll start with you, Casey. First off, because we're all old enough to have witnessed UNLV in the early 90s. How much could we compare this Gonzaga team to what we saw to what UNLV did in the Big West in the early 90s?
No, I think it's a good comparison, Andy, and here's why. That team had multiple NBA players, and in the non-conference, they went out and they were just thumping big-time programs, and that's the most impressive thing about this Gonzaga team. This team just seems different. They have put together one of the most impressive few weeks of a non-conference that I have ever seen. I mean, look, the teams that they beat and the styles in which they beat them. Andy, you know, what UNLV did that year, it's very similar in that they have, they had multiple guys who could be considered for All-Americans on their team. You know, I think Gonzaga has three legit All-American candidates on their team, which no other team in the country can say.
Contenders within the league. I think we all are in agreement Gonzaga is going to win it. The question is, do they get beat? If they get beat, there's probably one team that could do it, possibly, and that's BYU, Roxy. To Casey's point about we didn't know about certain guys, that was a team we really didn't know. They were senior laden last season, but our Alex Barcelo has been phenomenal. What are your early thoughts on BYU and Mark Pope, and whether or not, A, they can be in the tournament, or B, possibly knock off Gonzaga at least once?
I think it's possible. I mean, if anybody's going to do it, they would have the best odds, you'd think, in this league. But with them, they're a little bit different than they were the way they played last year, right? I think there was a little bit more fluidity to them last year, and they were able to space the floor better. But it's a different makeup, Andy, for BYU this year. Matt Harms coming in as a grad transfer certainly impacts that. You got 7'3" hanging out in the middle. Alex Barcelo's playing at a great clip right now. They're experienced, maybe not together, but I like this group, and going to San Diego State and getting a win. That was a really good win. They've challenged themselves. They're going to, if anybody has the makeup to potentially knock off Gonzaga, it is BYU.
I was at the Mohegan Sun in November. I saw USF. I saw kind of both USFs. I saw them early, first game of the year, did not look good. A UMass Lowell team beat them. Then flip it around, and they defended Virginia quite well, and they won. Can they get to the tournament? Maybe, but they're going to have to do pretty well in the WCC. What are your early thoughts on USF?
I think they need a consistent third scorer, and that's been the issue. When they've been good, they've had that third scorer, whether it's Reevney. Somebody has had to step up, because I really like their guards with Shabazz and Bouye, but they need that consistent third scorer. And when they're good, they have that consistent secondary scoring. And at times it's eluded them, and that's why you've seen, Andy, the two different USFs. When they have that third score, that's when you've seen the good USF.
So St. Mary's, Casey, Tommy Kuzi is trying to do his best Jordan Ford imitation, and he's had his moments. And I want to be on that bandwagon, and then, they got throttled by San Diego State, and that raised some red flags. So what does St. Mary's need to do to become a tournament team?
Well, Randy Bennett has earned our trust as far as his offensive teams and the way they move the ball, but this team doesn't quite have as many weapons as Team 4, and there's only so much you can do as a coaching staff. Right now, they're ranked 83rd in the country in offensive efficiency, and that's just not what a typical St. Mary's team over the last 5, 6, 7 years has been. So they're going to have to lean a little bit more on their defense, which is pretty good, pretty stout. St. Mary's is going to be there, but it's a tough ceiling to break through, of course, with Gonzaga and BYU, as good as they are right now.
All right, Roxy, Pepperdine. 2 years in a row, I want to believe in this team. Kobe Ross, Edwards. I mean, Ross obviously is one of the best playmakers in the country, and yet they get right there and then they can't cross over. I mean, that UCLA game sort of epitomizes what's happened the last couple of years. It was there for them to win. They couldn't get across the finish line. What does Pepperdine need to do here in the conference to rise up to maybe be a top 4 team?
Well, you mentioned it with USF, right? You've seen two different USF teams. Well, we've seen two different Pepperdine teams. There's the good Pepperdine team, which you talked about, which went toe-to-toe with UCLA and San Diego State. They beat Cal at Firestone Fieldhouse. But then there's the other side of Pepperdine where they get blown out at home right before Christmas by Bakersfield. They lose to CSUN. So, like, which will the real Pepperdine please stand up? For them, they have to find some consistency in the offensive end, because I'm like you, I'm trying to figure out which is the Pepperdine team when we enter league play. Do they have the talent to be a top 4 team? Absolutely. But on a nightly basis, I'm not sure what to expect from them.